She paid full price for first class, but when the stewardess saw her skin, she skipped her with the meal cart like she didn't exist. The white man beside her got filet mignon and a warm smile. She asked, calmly, why she was being ignored, and the stewardess whispered, because people like you make the cabin uncomfortable. Phone stayed down. Passengers looked away. Then she reached into her bag and revealed who she really was. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The gate attendant barely looked up as she scanned Alicia Jameson's boarding pass. Her finger twitched subtly as she noticed the row number, 1A, first class. Her eyes flicked upward for the briefest second, locking onto Alicia's soft brown skin, then down again without a word. The scanner beeped green, but no welcome aboard, just a silent nod, laced with suspicion. Alicia didn't flinch. She had grown accustomed to the micro-calculations people made when they saw her. A young black woman traveling alone, dressed in minimalist designer wear, with edges laid and posture upright. She moved with a confidence too practiced to be mistaken for arrogance. But confidence, she knew, didn't always protect you. She stepped into the jet bridge, adjusting the strap of her sleek leather carry-on. Behind her, the murmurs of boarding passengers echoed. Most didn't notice her. Some did. One older white man narrowed his eyes as she stepped into first class. A young couple glanced at her, then exchanged whispers behind cupped hands. They were subtle, but Alicia noticed. She always noticed. Inside the cabin, the lighting was dimmed to a soft gold, designed to soothe the elite into their reclining thrones. Warm hand towels, champagne flutes, a curated playlist humming through speakers. It was indulgence wrapped in civility. Yet even here, civility had conditions. The stewardess met her at the front. Mid-40s, stiff smile, platinum blonde bob set in hairspray lacquer. Her name tag read Melanie. She offered a practiced smile, but it stalled mid-expression when her eyes met Alicia's. "Miss?" Melanie asked, as if Alicia had lost her way. "Jameson," Alicia replied, voice steady. "Seat 1A. Melanie paused, quickly recovering into a tight-lipped grin. "Of course, right this way." Alicia took her seat, placing her bag carefully in the overhead compartment. The cabin smelled faintly of citrus and leather. She settled into the plush seat and glanced briefly out the window. 30,000 feet in the air, she'd be unreachable. For most, that meant detachment. For Alicia, it meant exposure. Alicia leaned back, trying to steady her thoughts. This wasn't just another trip. This was the last flight in a 6-month undercover rotation, one she'd entered willingly, one she couldn't afford to fail. The Federal In-Flight Authority didn't publicize its internal investigations. Passengers assumed the friendly skies were just that friendly. But the FIA knew otherwise. A string of racial complaints from high-paying black travelers had quietly escalated into a full-blown crisis behind closed doors. Denied meals, downgraded seating, excessive scrutiny. Little things, but they added up. Alicia had been recruited for her calm, her composure, her ability to blend in just enough to be overlooked, but sharp enough to capture everything that mattered. As the other first-class passengers began boarding, Melanie returned, offering glasses of champagne with a smile that now seemed restored. She passed them out to a middle-aged white man in 1B, an elegant elderly woman in 2A, and a young, ruddy-faced finance bro in 2B. Each one received a personal greeting. Each one received a laugh, a compliment, or a welcome back. Alicia passed over. Not even a glance. She watched silently as the bubbles rose in the glasses around her. The man in 1B took a generous sip and leaned toward her, flashing a grin. "Didn't peg you for a first-class regular," he said, eyes dancing with that familiar blend of flirtation and condescension. Alicia turned slowly. "And what exactly do first-class regulars look like?" He shrugged, caught off guard. "You know what I mean. Business exec, maybe, or influencer." "Neither," she said, turning back to her window. Melanie returned, now checking seatbelts and offering menus, leather-bound, gold-trimmed. Again, Alicia was skipped. Purposefully. When Melanie reached 1B, she leaned down with a laugh. "Welcome back, Mr. Reed. The duck à l'orange is divine today. You'll love it." Mr. Reed beamed. "You always take care of me, Melanie. And always will," she said, brushing a speck from his sleeve. Then she turned and paused at Alicia. A forced smile. "Oh. Sorry. Are you with someone?" "No," Alicia replied. "I'm a solo traveler." Melanie's eyes narrowed slightly. I see. I'll be right back with the coach menu. Excuse me? Alicia asked, now fully facing her. Melanie tilted her head. It's policy. Non-status upgrades receive the economy options unless otherwise arranged. That's not FIA regulation, Alicia said, measured. And this is a full fare ticket. Melanie blinked, her smile turning glacial. I'll check with the purser. She turned sharply and walked toward the galley, muttering something under her breath. Alicia wasn't sure what she'd said, but the older woman in 2A clearly heard. Her eyes widened, and her mouth fell slightly open. Melanie returned moments later, standing just beside Alicia's seat. She leaned in, her voice barely audible, but loud enough for the passengers in 1B and 2A to hear. You people always have something to complain about. Silence. It hit like turbulence. The words didn't echo. They sunk. Mr. Reed stared, mouth slightly open. The woman in 2A lowered her eyes, looking both shocked and uncomfortable. No one said anything. The tension hung thick, like cabin pressure ready to explode. Alicia sat motionless. Years of racial conditioning screamed at her to keep calm. She swallowed the lump rising in her throat. She knew what this was. This wasn't just a stewardess having a bad day. This was systemic, practiced, protected. And now, recorded. Unseen beneath her folded sweater, a tiny body cam lens, legal, hidden, FIA issued, captured every word. Melanie smiled and walked away. Alicia exhaled slowly, heart pounding, not from fear but calculation. This wasn't just any flight, and Melanie had no idea who she was speaking to. As Melanie rounded the corner into the galley, the cabin door shut, and her voice carried from behind the curtain. She laughed with a coworker and said, "Watch that one. She thinks she's important, that she's a welfare upgrade." Alicia didn't touch the napkin right away. She stared at it, folded neatly on her tray like a secret note passed under a school desk. It hadn't come from the flight crew. It hadn't come from the white passengers around her, sitting in polished silence, heads turned conveniently toward their tablets and in-flight magazines. It had come from a little black girl, a stranger, a mirror. Alicia ran her fingers along the soft paper. The ink had slightly bled through, nervous handwriting, hurried but careful. Record everything. Someone had noticed. Someone younger. Someone who still believed in fairness. She slid the napkin into her notebook and closed it gently. Then the vibration came from her purse. That subtle hum of encrypted urgency. Alicia reached down and checked the screen. We've identified the stewardess. Her name's on the list. Proceed carefully. The list. It was always just the list, in the office. Internally circulated by the Federal In-Flight Authority. It contained names of flight staff, flagged in prior discrimination complaints. Some formal, most informal. All buried. Melanie's name had been on the pending investigation tier, until now. But Alicia didn't react. Not outwardly. She'd learned early that emotion, especially her emotion, made people uncomfortable. In elementary school, when a white classmate pulled her braids and she pushed back, it wasn't him who was scolded. It was her. The teacher had whispered, "You can't react like that, Alicia. People won't understand." She never forgot that. So when Melanie returned to the aisle with another tray, again skipping Alicia's seat, Alicia didn't flinch. But inside? Inside, she heard her mother's voice. "Baby, your skin is not armor, but the world will treat it like it is. So stand straight, speak soft, and never let them see you bleed." Alicia had built a life on that lesson. She was 27 now, a data analyst turned federal investigator. Ivy League educated, fluent in 3 languages, and more observant than anyone ever realized. She didn't need to shout to be dangerous. She just needed to remember. And she remembered everything about Melanie. The forced smile. The eye roll that followed. The strategic service avoidance. The way her voice turned tight. Acidic. When Alicia asked questions. It wasn't hatred. Not exactly. It was something more socially acceptable. Discomfort disguised as policy. That was the new face of racism. Alicia leaned forward and pressed the call button. Melanie appeared within seconds. Too fast. She was already watching. "Yes?" Melanie asked. "I'd like my meal," Alicia said, voice low but precise. "The one included with the full fare first-class ticket I paid for." Melanie's face didn't change. But her eyes, those narrowed slits of forced civility, gleamed with something colder than disinterest. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said, "but we've run out of that option. You weren't listed on the manifest as a priority guest. That's incorrect, Alicia replied. My reservation was made 2 weeks ago. First class. No upgrades. I understand, Melanie said, smiling. But it was that smile. The one Alicia knew well. The one her mother warned her about. Some smiles aren't kindness, baby. They're warnings dressed as manners. Melanie leaned in slightly, lowered her voice so that only Alicia and the few passengers nearby could hear. It's not for your kind. The words hit like cold water. Alicia felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her gaze locked. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. She didn't give Melanie the satisfaction of a reaction. But others had heard. The woman in 2A froze mid-sip of her tea. The man in 1B slowly turned his head, confusion painted across his face. Even Natalie, the younger stewardess returning from the rear cabin, seemed to pause mid-step, her brows twitching as she passed by. Melanie straightened and walked away, as if she hadn't said anything at all. As if racism now came with an invisibility cloak, spoken softly enough to be denied, but loud enough to sting. Alicia closed her eyes. The cabin suddenly felt smaller. She was 12 again, sitting in a theater on a school trip, asked to move seats because these rows are reserved. She was 19 again, at a networking event, mistaken for catering. She was 25 on a job site visit, where a junior white colleague had told the client, "Don't worry, she's just here shadowing me." She had buried each of those moments deep. But they never really left. They layered. And now, 34,000 feet above the earth, it had happened again, only now, she had the tools to do something about it. Alicia opened her notebook and scribbled something next to Melanie's name. Delivers prejudice in a whisper. Precise. Practiced. Knows who she's targeting. She kept her hand steady, her breathing even. From behind the curtain, laughter erupted again. Alicia didn't need to hear the words. The tone said enough. And yet, the flight continued. Other passengers accepted their entrees, their wine pairings, their compliments from Melanie. They returned to their tablets, their headphones, their clouds of privileged detachment. But the atmosphere had shifted. Melanie was no longer just a stewardess. She was a gatekeeper, and Alicia had been marked. She leaned back in her seat and reached slowly for her encrypted phone again, tapping into the secure FIA app. A new notification sat at the top. Pending surveillance review. Upload footage immediately upon landing. Flag high priority. This wasn't just one incident anymore.
This was evidence.
She glanced around. Mr. Reed in 1B was staring at his drink, clearly unsettled. The woman in 2A looked as though she wanted to say something but couldn't summon the courage. No one offered support. No one asked if she was okay, and somehow that hurt more, because they knew.
They saw.
But they still chose comfort over confrontation. Alicia had grown used to this loneliness. It came with the job. It came with being a black woman in spaces built for someone else. She pulled out her headphones, placed them in her ears, but didn't press play. She just needed the illusion of space. Her fingers tapped gently on her knee. A rhythm her mother used to play when Alicia couldn't sleep. Back then, her mother would whisper lullabies layered with warning. You be careful, girl. The world smiles in your face and cuts behind your back. Melanie returned with a tray. A smaller one. Here you go, she said cheerfully. Snack box and water. Alicia looked at the box. A plastic rectangle with processed cheese, dry crackers, and 3 raisins. Not a meal. Not even close. This is unacceptable, Alicia said quietly. Melanie leaned in again. And yet it's all you'll get. Before Alicia could respond, Melanie straightened and moved down the aisle. Alicia sat still, her spine rigid. This wasn't rage, it was resolve. She reached into her bag again, pulled out her pen, and wrote something bold across the top of her notebook page. This ends here. Just then, a hand from the row behind tapped her seat lightly. A napkin, folded again. She took it. A different handwriting this time. Neat. Control. Just one sentence. She's done this before. Alicia turned sharply. But whoever had passed it was already gone. Disappeared behind a blanket, a book, or a convenient silence. She stared at the note, her heart pounding. And then, a flight attendant's voice echoed over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, due to an internal issue, we've had to switch crew schedules mid-flight. A new purser is joining us shortly from the back cabin. Alicia froze. There wasn't supposed to be a crew change. The cabin door sealed with a heavy thud, the final punctuation to Melanie's mocking remark, echoing from the galley. Alicia didn't move. She just let the silence settle around her like a second skin. It was a silence filled with unspoken observations, subtle glances, and the quiet dread of those who bore witness but feared involvement. Melanie's voice had reached further than she realized. The woman in 2A shifted uncomfortably in her seat, stealing a glance at Alicia with the kind of pity that said, "I heard it, but I won't get involved." The man in 1B fidgeted, rubbing his temple as though trying to erase the awkwardness or the guilt from his memory. Alicia stared ahead, her posture elegant, expression unreadable, but inside her nerves buzzed. Not with fear, but with restraint. This moment, this exact moment, was why she took the job, why she'd agreed to disappear into first-class cabins across the country, experiencing the quiet humiliations others denied existed. She leaned slightly toward her window. Her breath fogged the glass. "Excuse me," the older woman in 2A finally said, voice hesitant. "I couldn't help but overhear." Alicia turned, face calm. "Yes?" The woman blinked. "Did she really say?" "Yes," Alicia answered, voice clipped but even. "She did." "I'm so sorry," the woman said softly, lowering her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Alicia replied. "But silence speaks louder than people think." The woman looked stung but didn't argue. Alicia returned to her posture, calm, deliberate, invisible, if not for the elegance that refused to dull itself. She had made herself small before. In classrooms, in elevators, in boardrooms where her voice was only welcome when it sounded like theirs. But not today. From the galley, Melanie re-emerged with the practiced grace of someone who knew how to wear politeness, like armor. In her hands were silver platters, covered, pristine. She began distributing the first-class meals, her tone suddenly elevated, her steps precise. Alicia watched as she served everyone but her. Even as Melanie passed Alicia's row twice, she said nothing. No tray, no menu, no eye contact, and still, no apology. The man in 1B coughed. Uncomfortable. "Is she, aren't you supposed to?" Melanie smiled tightly. "We're short on meals." She was a late addition. "That's not true," Alicia said quietly. "I booked this ticket over 2 weeks ago. First class. Full fare." Melanie's expression didn't change. "I'm just doing what I was told, ma'am." That word "ma'am" felt like spit dressed in manners. Alicia inhaled deeply, her hand slipping into her sweater sleeve. Her thumb gently tapped the tiny embedded button. A soft vibration confirmed that the body cam was still rolling. She wasn't here to explode. She was here to expose. Melanie moved down the aisle, her smile intact for every other passenger. Alicia's stomach growled quietly, but her hunger wasn't just physical. It was generational. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "You don't speak unless you're ready to be dismissed. You stand tall even when they try to shrink you." Across the aisle, the man in 1B shifted again, stealing glances at Alicia, then at Melanie. Eventually he buzzed the call button. Melanie returned. "Yes, Mr. Reed." He lowered his voice. "Are you sure that was necessary? I mean, she's sitting right here." Melanie's smile thinned. "I'm following policy." "Which policy?" he asked. Uncomfortable now. "I've flown with you guys 100 times. This feels bad." "She'll get a snack box," Melanie replied. "We're done discussing it." Mr. Reed fell silent. Alicia didn't look at him. She didn't need his half-formed guilt. But others were noticing now. Whispers had begun behind her. 2B and beyond. A young man in business attire glanced over with furrowed brows. A woman clutched her purse tighter, not out of fear of Alicia, but fear of what would happen next. Tension changes air pressure. Everyone could feel it. Then something unexpected happened. A second stewardess appeared. She was younger, maybe in her early 30s, with dark brown hair pulled into a sleek bun. Her name tag read Natalie. Her face was unreadable as she approached Alicia's row with a tray. "A warm towel, ma'am," she said. Alicia accepted it silently. Natalie paused. "I can get you a ginger ale, or water for now." Alicia nodded once. "Water is fine." As Natalie turned to go, Alicia spoke low. "You don't agree with her, but you won't say anything, will you?" Natalie stiffened, glancing at the galley. "I'm just here to do my job." That's what she said too. Natalie hesitated, her face tightening, but said nothing more. Back in the galley, a curtain rustled. Alicia heard quiet laughter between Melanie and someone else. Then Melanie's voice, smug and unrepentant. "I swear she's trying to make a scene." They always do when they get something nice and think they're owed more. That word, they. Alicia clenched her jaw. It wasn't just about the meal anymore. It never was. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a small notebook. It looked like a journal, but inside were pages of observations from the last 6 months. Coded names, times, routes, flight crew IDs. This wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. But it would be the last one she let go unreported. And yet, part of her felt tired. Tired of holding her composure. Tired of filming proof. Tired of being told her experiences were imagined or exaggerated. Tired of being told that racism today was different. As if subtle violence hurt less. She closed the notebook. Across the aisle, the man in 1B tore open a snack mix bag, still glancing at her with discomfort he couldn't quite name. He wanted to say something again. Maybe apologize. Maybe pretend it wasn't happening. But he stayed silent, chewing slowly, letting the shame ferment. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now cruising at 34,000 feet. The pilot's voice came through. Estimated arrival in Dallas is on time. Enjoy the ride." Enjoy the ride. Alicia looked out the window again. Enjoy the ride. That's all it ever was to them. Then something brushed her elbow. She turned, startled. A young black girl, no older than 9, stood beside her. She was walking back from the bathroom, escorted by an older sibling, maybe 16. The girl paused, looked Alicia in the eyes, and slid something onto her tray table before walking away. A napkin, folded carefully. Alicia opened it. In small, shaky handwriting. "Record everything." Her throat tightened. She looked up quickly. The girl was already gone back behind the curtain to coach. But Alicia would remember her face. As Alicia folded the napkin back, her encrypted work phone buzzed in her purse. A new message lit up the screen. "We've identified the stewardess. Her name's on the list. Proceed carefully." Alicia's eyes didn't leave the intercom speaker as the announcement echoed across the cabin. A purser change mid-flight? That wasn't protocol. Not unless someone had been injured, or something had gone very, very wrong. Passengers stirred. Some looked around, confused. Others simply adjusted their blankets and returned to their screens. Only a few understood the implications of what was happening. Alicia wasn't just one of them. She was the reason. But the quiet tension rolling through her body wasn't born in that moment. It had been shaped long before, years before she ever boarded a plane in an FIA-issued Blazer. It began in a tiny apartment on the south side of Charlotte, North Carolina. Even as a child, Alicia had been marked, not by the world's hostility, but by its expectations. Her mother, Regina Jameson, had been a second-grade teacher for 34 years, soft-spoken, razor-sharp, and exhausted in a way that never reached her face. Only her posture. Regina had known what the world expected of her daughter, before Alicia had learned to spell her own name. "You have to be twice as good to get half as far," she'd repeat, as she ironed Alicia's school uniforms every Sunday night. "And don't let anyone tell you being smart is enough. It never is. Not for girls like us." Alicia internalized it all. The standards, the silence, the survival. She attended private school on scholarship, one of 3 black students in a sea of plaid skirts and privilege. At lunch she sat alone sometimes, not because she wasn't friendly, but because her presence reminded the others of something they weren't ready to acknowledge, that their spaces weren't built to include her. She graduated at the top of her class, summa cum laude from Columbia. She knew how to carry herself through rooms that were never designed with her in mind. She knew how to take up just enough space to matter, but not enough to be resented. And that restraint, that quiet force of excellence, that's what got her noticed. The FIA didn't put out job postings. They recruited. She had received the first call during her 3rd year, working for a Fortune 100 logistics firm. The voice on the other end didn't identify himself right away. Just asked if she'd be willing to meet. Off the record. Coffee. Midtown. Nothing formal. Curious but cautious. Alicia went. She wore navy blue, understated makeup. Neat heels. The man who greeted her at the cafe introduced himself only as Donovan. Mid-50s, black, with a calm intensity that made people sit straighter without realizing it. He slid a manila folder across the table. No label, no pitch, just facts. Flight data, passenger complaints, internal crew rosters. A pattern. "Do you see it?" he asked. Alicia scanned the pages. Names, times, incidents. Every one of them quiet, polite, devastating. She nodded once. "I see it." Donovan leaned forward. We think you're the kind of person who could get the data we can't. Alicia blinked. Why me? Because you're the kind of person they'll underestimate. That answer stayed with her. Not just that day, but every day that followed. After accepting the position off the books, under tight clearance her training began. It wasn't boot camp. It was psychological warfare prep. They taught her how to recognize coded language in service delivery, how to decode crew dynamics from body language, how to wear invisibility like perfume, subtle but always present. She learned about the racial optics model, how airline staff were trained, sometimes indirectly, to calibrate comfort perception based on passengers' skin color, clothing, accent, and demeanor. The older the airline, the more deeply buried these biases were. She also learned how internal complaints were processed, how certain names never made it to formal reports, how apologies were issued in bulk, but corrections were rarely implemented. On her first official day at FIA headquarters, she entered a steel gray office with no windows. Donovan was already there, standing by a whiteboard covered in flight numbers and crew initials. This isn't about proving racism exists, he told her, without turning. That part is done. This is about showing how it operates in silence, with structure, with intent. He finally faced her. Your job is to become part of that silence, and then break it. He handed her a sleek, government-issued tablet, a small badge, and a simple directive. Your first mission, fly unnoticed. She had blinked, startled. That's it? Donovan nodded. Make them comfortable enough to show you who they really are. She had taken 8 flights in the first 2 months. Then 20. Then 40. She used fake names, different booking channels, rotated between airlines. She adjusted her wardrobe just enough to avoid the angry black woman stereotype, but never enough to appear wealthy. The pattern emerged quickly. On flights where she was dressed down, she was ignored more often. Given limited options, her bag was checked twice as often. If she wore heels and a sleek blazer, she was asked if she was with someone. When she used her real last name, Jameson, she noticed more friendliness. When she used her alias, Alicia Walker, the tone shifted. It wasn't random. It was orchestration. Every slight, every smirk, every time she was handed peanuts while the white man next to her received warm cashews. And now, on this flight, Melanie had walked straight into Alicia's documentation with boldness that suggested security, that suggested protection. But Melanie didn't know that Alicia's report would be going directly to the director. That Alicia was not alone. The cabin remained oddly still after the intercom announcement. The phrase "a new purser is joining us shortly" lingered in the air like misplaced turbulence. Alicia checked her secure phone again.
No update.
She glanced toward the galley. Melanie was still laughing with another crew member, oblivious. Then from the back of the plane just beyond the drawn curtain, a man emerged. Tall, black, late 40s, wearing a navy blue crew vest, but his stride said authority. Alicia's pulse quickened, not because she was afraid, but because she recognized him. Devin Holt, another FIA agent. He didn't look at her as he passed, didn't nod, didn't blink. But she knew that face. He had briefed her 6 weeks ago on crew corruption mitigation strategy.
And now, he was here.
That wasn't part of the plan. She watched as he stopped near the galley, speaking to Melanie in hushed tones. Her expression shifted, confused, defensive. She started gesturing toward Alicia's route. Devin held up a hand firm but composed. The kind of hand that said, "You've already said too much." Alicia kept her gaze forward. Her heart was thudding now, not from fear, from anticipation. The story was shifting. The silence had cracked. And Melanie? She didn't even know the storm was circling her. As Davin walked back toward the cockpit, Melanie approached Alicia again, this time with a tight smile and 2 champagne flutes. "Compliments of the crew," she said. "We'd like to make up for any misunderstanding." Alicia took one, raised her glass, and said quietly, "You're not the one who should be apologizing." Then she took a sip and her lips immediately tingled. The sensation on Alicia's lips was subtle at first. A tingling that could be easily dismissed as nerves, or the fizz from the champagne. But Alicia knew her body. She knew how it reacted to pressure, to fear, to adrenaline. This wasn't that. She lowered the flute slowly, her fingers tightening slightly around the stem. The effervescence still danced at the top of the glass, golden and inviting. Her eyes remained fixed on Melanie, who stood by with that same artificial calm, her hands clasped in front of her. "Enjoy," Melanie said, and turned back toward the galley. Alicia didn't drink again. She set the glass down and tapped the underside of her tray, activating the embedded scanner discreetly, tucked into her purse. A quick swab from her napkin, barely noticeable to anyone watching, slid into a concealed compartment. The scanner would test for sedatives or contaminants. The result wouldn't come instantly. But she didn't need it to. Something had changed. This wasn't just racism served cold anymore. It was evolving. Desperate. Panicked. The arrival of Devon, her FIA colleague in disguise, had clearly shaken the dynamic. He hadn't spoken to her. He wasn't supposed to. But the timing wasn't a coincidence. Alicia's encrypted phone buzzed against her thigh again, subtle as a whisper. She opened the message behind her menu, angling the phone to shield the screen from view. "She's one of the targets. Confirmed behavior. Flight flagged 2 weeks ago. Crew protected by internal union cover." Her breath caught. So this wasn't just a random flight. It hadn't been from the start. FIA had known about this crew. About Melanie. And they'd sent Alicia to confirm what they already suspected, but hadn't told her until now. It explained everything.
The oversights.
The service. The way Melanie had moved through the cabin like someone entitled to enforce hierarchy. They weren't just dealing with racial bias. They were dealing with institutional shielding. The flight had been flagged. That meant multiple complaints, all quietly settled or erased. Crew like Melanie weren't just trained to manage optics. They were emboldened by lack of accountability. Alicia adjusted in her seat. She scanned the cabin again, recalibrating everything she thought she knew.
Mr. Reed in 1B.
He wasn't just uncomfortable. He was watching, pretending to read, but sneaking glances every other page. The older woman in 2A had now taken out her phone and was typing a message furiously. Even Natalie, the younger stewardess, was moving differently. Slower, guarded. They all knew something was wrong. But still, no one spoke. Silence was easier than confrontation. Alicia had lived her entire life inside that silence. Now it was time to weaponize it. She opened her notebook and flipped to the back. A coded list of previous flights, each with notes written in shorthand only FIA agents were trained to interpret. At the bottom she added a new line. Flight 34087, Melanie C., confirmed discrimination, behavior escalation, post-verbal engagement, possible tampering. She paused, then added, target identified. Active suppression protocols, likely. In the world of airline compliance, active suppression was a dog whistle. It meant coordinated efforts by staff to discredit, ignore, or isolate passengers who didn't fit first-class expectations, usually black travelers who booked full fare, not upgrades or rewards. They weren't denying racism. They were refining it. Alicia's mind spun with precision. She opened her secure app and began uploading audio from the body cam. Segment by segment, every muttered remark, every interaction, each smile that curled with disdain. She had evidence. Now, she needed an escalation. Her phone vibrated again. New crew manifest found. Melanie and Natalie trained under flagged supervisor. Cross-check initiated. Avoid confrontation. Alicia's stomach dropped. This wasn't just Melanie.
Natalie too?
She had shown kindness. Hesitation. But hesitation wasn't protection. It was self-preservation. The flagged supervisor line meant both of them had been coached in the same environment, an internal culture that passed down bias like it was part of the onboarding process. Alicia looked up and met Natalie's gaze as she passed. Their eyes held. Natalie blinked first. She wasn't ready for this. Alicia knew she had to act fast. She tapped the tray again, switching the body cam to real-time stream. Not just record, stream. If anything happened to her before landing, the FIA would already have the footage archived. She leaned forward, sipping plain water now, and caught her reflection in the black screen of her phone. Her mother's voice returned again, the same tone she had used before Alicia left for college. You'll be in places they say you belong, but they'll treat you like you wandered in by mistake. Don't ask for their approval. Take your space and dare them to call it theft. Alicia felt the words settle in her chest, and just as she drew a breath, a hand tapped her shoulder. She turned. It was the little black girl from earlier. She stood with her older sister, teenage confident, clearly watching everything. The girl reached into her hoodie pocket and handed Alicia something quietly. A small folded pamphlet. A boarding pass. It wasn't theirs. Alicia opened it slowly and saw the name Denise Clary. Seat 3A. Class. Business. Only there was no row 3 in this cabin. Just 1 and 2, meaning someone had been downgraded. Alicia's eyes snapped up. She whispered, "Where did you get this?" The older sister leaned in. "Our mom. They told her something was wrong with her ticket. Said it didn't scan right. Made her go to the back." Alicia's blood chilled. That meant another full-fare black passenger had been pushed out of first class before boarding. No cause, no explanation. Just erased. And it would have gone unnoticed. Alicia looked toward the galley again. Melanie wasn't back yet, but Natalie was watching. And this time she looked afraid. Alicia tucked the boarding pass away, stood up slowly, and moved toward the curtain separating first from business. Every step forward felt like walking into a memory. A classroom where her questions were too sharp. A job interview where her voice was too direct. A boardroom where she was praised for being articulate, but never promoted. And now, a cabin where her money bought the seat, but not the respect. She pulled the curtain aside and froze. Melanie stood there, facing away, whispering into a phone behind her hand. Alicia caught only a few words. "No. She's suspicious. Yeah, Walker. Like the others. Walker. Her alias." Melanie knew. Alicia's heart dropped, but she didn't panic. She stepped back into her row, calm, composed. It wasn't just about confirmation anymore. It was about containment. She checked her phone one more time. A final message lit the screen, highlighted in red. Priority update. Target Melanie C. has known FIA leaks. Upload immediately. If compromised, switch to protocol V6. Alicia hadn't used it in the field before. It meant full disclosure, going public on the flight. She stared at the message. Then she clicked the stream button again. The screen blinked. Live. Just as Alicia prepared to speak, a tone blared overhead and the pilot's voice cracked through the speaker. "Due to a situation in the forward cabin, we'll be making an emergency landing in Houston." The pilot's voice was low and rehearsed, but Alicia heard the forced edge. "Due to a situation in the forward cabin, we'll be making an emergency landing in Houston. Estimated arrival 20. The intercom cut off and the hum of the aircraft returned. But now it felt different. Everything in the cabin shifted. Eyes lifted, heads turned, whispers erupted like sparks, trying to find oxygen. Some passengers glanced toward the cockpit, others toward Alicia, subtle but unmistakable. In first class, emergency had a distinct flavor. It didn't mean a fire, it meant a problem, and problems were rarely described, only implied. Alicia remained seated. Her fingers were still lightly pressed against the encrypted phone under her tray, the stream still rolling. She didn't speak, didn't blink. But her pulse was deafening in her ears. She'd flown through dozens of tense moments, but never one where the system blinked first. Melanie reemerged from the galley, her smile as polished as ever, but now it looked like armor, not hospitality. "Everything's under control," she said, addressing the front few rows. "The pilot is just being cautious." But her eyes met Alicia's, and something flickered beneath the surface. Anger. Not fear, not apology, just fury that Alicia was still here. Still upright, still smiling. Alicia raised her eyebrow, ever so slightly, and leaned back in her seat. Melanie turned away, forcing a friendly chuckle as she approached 1B. She topped off Mr. Reed's champagne with a flourish. "Sorry about the delay, sir. Can I interest you in a second pastry?" He blinked, caught off guard. Sure, I guess. Chef's special," she said cheerfully, then moved down the aisle with the same practiced glide. Alicia waited a moment, then lifted her glass again, not to drink but to check the weight. Still full. Still untouched. A silent testament to who got served and who got surveilled. She buzzed the call button. Nothing. She pressed it again. Still nothing. Across the aisle, Mr. Reed watched, uneasy. "Did you not get yours yet?" he asked softly, nodding toward the cart. "I've been told I'm not on the priority list," Alicia replied evenly. His brows furrowed.
But you're in first class.
She gave a polite smile. "Yes. But apparently not the right kind of first class." Before he could reply, Natalie, the younger stewardess, appeared at Alicia's row, her face taut with indecision. "Miss Walker," she said quietly, bending slightly. "May I speak with you for just a moment?" Alicia nodded. Natalie gestured toward the rear galley, behind the thin curtain separating first class from the rest of the aircraft. Alicia rose calmly, grabbed her bag and followed. Behind the curtain, the air changed. The murmur of coach passengers, the clatter of beverage carts. It all sounded louder here, more human. Natalie turned, biting her lip. I wasn't supposed to say anything, she began, voice shaky. But I think you should know. Alicia stayed silent, letting her speak. There's a document we sometimes get before certain flights, Natalie said. It's not official, it's like an informal alert list. Just notes, passenger profiles, basically. It tells us who to pay attention to. Alicia's eyes narrowed. And I was on it? Natalie nodded. Yes. It said your name. Alicia Walker. Observe for potential entitlement behavior. She swallowed hard. It also said, do not prioritize for upgraded service. Alicia's breath slowed. She felt the floor under her shift. Not physically, but emotionally. They had a watch list, not for safety, not for behavior, but for bias. And who gives you this list? Alicia asked. Natalie hesitated. It's shared between some crew teams. It usually comes from a lead. I think Melanie gets them directly from a supervisor. Alicia folded her arms, her voice like steel. So it's unofficial, untracked, and selectively enforced. Natalie looked down. Yes. And most of the names I've seen on it, they're people of color, especially black women. Alicia stared past her for a moment. The moment was heavy, not just with confirmation, but with memory. 100 small humiliations rushed back, each one suddenly reclassified. Not random, not personal, coordinated. Natalie took a deep breath. I'm sorry, I didn't know what it really was at first. But after what happened earlier, she paused. I don't want to be part of this anymore. Alicia stepped closer. You just were, she said gently. You told the truth. Now let's see what they do with it. She returned to her seat, her spine straighter than before. As she buckled in, Melanie passed by again, eyes scanning for weakness. But Alicia gave her none. She reached into her bag and pulled out the pamphlet the little girl had handed her earlier. She placed it next to the untouched meal box on her tray, a silent message. She had receipts. The intercom buzzed again. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our descent shortly into Houston. Please remain seated. Flight attendants, prepare for landing. Across the aisle, Mr. Reed looked visibly rattled. He leaned slightly toward Alicia. Listen, I didn't realize, I heard some of what she said, but I didn't think it was really this deep. Alicia turned her head, her expression unreadable. That's the problem, she said. No one ever thinks it is, until they see it from my seat. The cabin began to tilt slightly as the descent initiated. Window shades opened. Conversations paused. But underneath it all, the air held an electric charge. Melanie approached the front row one last time. Please fasten your seatbelts, she said smoothly. And thank you for flying with us. As she passed Alicia's row, her foot caught the edge of the tray slightly, knocking Alicia's water. A splash hit Alicia's dress. Melanie gasped, too theatrical. Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me. Alicia held up her hand. No need, she said coolly. You've spilled enough already. The nearby passengers flinched at the remark. Melanie's smile faltered. Just a flicker, and for the first time all flight. She didn't reply. Alicia dabbed at her dress with the corner of her napkin. But her hands weren't trembling, because now it was bigger than a spill, bigger than a meal. It was a system, and she had her foot in the door. As the plane dipped toward Houston, the sun broke through the clouds and painted the cabin in gold. And just as the wheels touched the runway, Alicia's encrypted phone buzzed again. A new message appeared on the screen. This time with an image attachment. Melanie seated beside a man in a conference room. Captioned, Same stewardess. Settled discrimination complaint 11 months ago. Covered up. You weren't the first. Miriam Lane had always considered herself one of the good ones. She voted blue, donated to causes, had a niece who marched in Ferguson, and regularly shared quotes from Maya Angelou on her Instagram stories. At work, she corrected coworkers who made off-color jokes. At dinner parties, she reminded guests to be mindful of privilege. But none of that helped her now. Seatbelt fastened, fingers digging into the armrests in first class, just 2 rows behind Alicia Jameson. Because now she wasn't watching a video. She wasn't reading a story. She was living inside the silence, and it was choking her. Miriam had seen it unfold from the beginning. The way Melanie's smile changed as soon as Alicia boarded. The way the champagne skipped her tray. The way Alicia's request for a meal had been met with an expression that reminded Miriam of her grandmother's tone when speaking about those people. Miriam had caught Melanie's whisper too. "Not for your kind." She'd heard it, loud enough, clear enough, and still she'd said nothing. Not when Alicia was skipped again. Not when the snack box was dropped like a bone tossed to a dog. Not when Mr. Reed, flustered, mumbled something and then looked away. Miriam had been part of that silence. Her throat had closed up. Not out of agreement, but out of the same cowardice she'd spent her life denying she had.
What could she have said? That's inappropriate. Are you sure this is fair? Those words sounded small in her mind.
Fragile. Easy to bat away. So instead she sipped her wine. And watched. And rationalized. Maybe she didn't see it clearly. Maybe she didn't have all the facts. Maybe Alicia had been rude. Maybe, just maybe, it was an isolated case. But now, as the wheels screeched against the Houston runway and the cabin bounced gently before gliding to a halt, Miriam's stomach dropped. A buzz had rippled through the plane after the emergency landing announcement. Phones had been checked. Passengers were murmuring louder now. Something wasn't normal. The plane taxied slower than usual. And then the image burned in her mind. Alicia, still composed, dabbing a water spill from her dress with a napkin that had been handed to her, instead of an apology. A napkin that looked a lot like surrender, but wasn't. Miriam glanced to the side. Melanie had resumed her performance, hands behind her back, chin up, relaying instructions in a calm, even tone. She moved through the cabin like royalty, untouched by consequence. Then it happened. As Miriam leaned forward to grab her purse from under the seat, she heard it. A male voice, low, dry, and whispered from the road directly behind Alicia. Should have known she'd make it about race. The words were so soft, so quiet, they could have been mistaken for a breath. But Miriam had heard every syllable. She froze. Her throat went dry. Alicia didn't react. Maybe she hadn't heard. Maybe she had, and chose not to. But something in Miriam cracked. That voice wasn't just wrong. It was familiar. She recognized it. The man from 2B. The finance bro with the Bluetooth earpiece who'd been chuckling to himself while flipping through a spreadsheet earlier. He hadn't spoken much. But now he had. Miriam sat up straight. Her pulse raced. She turned to face the man directly behind Alicia. He didn't meet her eyes. He kept looking out the window. But he had said it, and now he was hoping the plane would land before anyone made him accountable. Miriam's fingers clenched her armrest. She glanced back at Alicia, still calm, still composed, still seemingly unaware. Or maybe just practiced in not responding. Miriam could feel the familiar war starting inside her chest. Say something, her conscience roared. But her fear screamed back. What if it gets messy? What if she doesn't want help? What if you make it worse? And then, Alicia slowly turned her head. Not toward the man, toward her. Their eyes met, and Miriam saw it. Clarity. Alicia knew. Not just about the slur, but about Miriam's silence. She held Miriam's gaze for only a second, but it was enough to ignite shame like fire. Miriam stood, not all at once. Her knees trembled slightly. Her throat burned. Her voice came out dry. "Excuse me," she said. No one looked up, so she spoke again. Louder. "Excuse me." Now eyes turned. Even Alicia blinked, caught off guard. Miriam's voice was shaky, but she kept going. "I just heard something," she said, "and I'm not going to pretend I didn't." Silence fell over the cabin like a thunderclap. The man in 2B finally turned. "Is there a problem?" he asked, tone defensive. "Yes," Miriam said, her voice gaining force. "You said something disgusting. About her." She pointed at Alicia. Melanie reappeared from the galley. "Ma'am, please lower your voice." "No," Miriam snapped. "No, I won't. I've been quiet this whole flight, watching how you treated her, how he talked about her. And I'm done being polite about it." Mr. Reed shifted uncomfortably. A woman in coach leaned forward to listen through the curtain. Melanie moved toward Miriam, voice low and rehearsed. "I'm going to have to ask you to sit down, or you'll be escorted from the plane." "Escorted?" Miriam repeated, stunned. "For what?" Alicia asked, finally standing. Melanie hesitated. "For interfering with flight operations," she replied. Alicia narrowed her eyes. "She's speaking," she said evenly. "That's not interference. That's accountability." Natalie emerged from the back. Confusion etched across her face. "What's going on?" she asked. Miriam turned to her. I heard a passenger use a racial slur. I reported it, and now I'm being threatened with removal. Natalie froze. Melanie stepped in again. We're trying to keep the situation calm. You're escalating it. Miriam laughed bitterly. By pointing out racism, the man in 2B finally spoke, smug and dismissive. This is ridiculous, I didn't say anything like that. Alicia stepped closer. No, she asked, because I have a live audio feed running to the Federal In-Flight Authority. The man blanched. Melanie paled. Natalie looked between them, horrified. I suggest, Alicia said, you all stop talking and wait for the agents who'll be boarding shortly. And just then, the intercom buzzed. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. FAA compliance officers will be boarding the aircraft for a procedural review. Do not leave your seats unless instructed. Gasps. Whispers. The man in 2B tried to open his laptop, then quietly shut it again. Miriam sat down, heart thundering, pulse ringing in her ears. She had spoken. Too late, maybe, but finally. Honestly. And Alicia? She nodded once in Miriam's direction. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. Miriam would take it. The plane rolled to a stop at a remote gate. Agents in dark blue uniforms waited at the base of the stairs, and Alicia's phone buzzed again. A final message appeared. Confirm if other crew are compromised. Natalie flagged. Use caution. The aircraft door remained shut as the plane idled on the tarmac, the heavy pause between landing and disembarkment stretching into something more suffocating than stillness. It became a reckoning. Alicia stood in the narrow aisle of first class, calm and unmoving, the cabin around her suspended in a hushed state of disbelief. She was no longer just another passenger. Her presence now radiated with the authority of someone no longer asking to be heard, but demanding to be witnessed. Melanie's veneer of control had cracked. Her hands fidgeted as she stood awkwardly near the galley, eyeing Alicia with guarded hostility. Natalie hovered just a few feet away, visibly shaken. The man in 2B now avoided eye contact completely, shrinking into the anonymity of his seat. And still, the aircraft door did not open. The agents outside, FIA, Alicia assumed, had yet to board. But the clock was ticking. There was a window of time here, and Alicia intended to use every second of it. She pulled her encrypted phone from her bag, turned toward the aisle, and slowly, deliberately, tapped begin statement. The body cam recorded. The stream continued. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice measured and steady. This won't take long. I'm speaking today not as a fellow passenger, but as an agent of the Federal In-Flight Authority, currently mid-investigation regarding discriminatory practices aboard this flight. The shift was immediate. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Even Miriam, still seated behind her, straightened up in surprise. Alicia continued. This is not a confrontation. It's not a disruption. It's a documentation of facts, events that occurred during this flight, that violate multiple FAA service regulations, including Title 14, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 38-2, which prohibits discrimination in air travel based on race, color, national origin, and other protected statuses. Melanie let out a nervous laugh. This is absurd, she said. She's lying. Alicia turned to her. I've recorded every interaction, every denial of service, every word you've spoken since boarding. And as of 10 minutes ago, this flight was flagged for emergency review by the FAA due to credible complaints of racial targeting. You're no longer operating under standard policy protection. Natalie's face paled. She slowly stepped backward, eyes wide. Alicia turned back to the passengers. I was denied standard service while seated in first class. I was served last, if at all spoken to in a discriminatory tone, and ultimately targeted by a stewardess with a previously settled discrimination case that was buried by internal HR. Gasps again. Melanie took a step forward, flustered. This is slander. It's documentation, Alicia replied. And it's being uploaded to the FIA secure servers as we speak. Alicia took out the napkin the little black girl had given her. She held it up. This was the first sign, a warning from a child who recognized what was happening before most adults dared to speak. She saw it. So did many of you. She turned slightly, locking eyes with the passengers around her. Mr. Reed looked down. Miriam met her gaze. The man in 2B crossed his arms, jaw clenched. You heard the language, Alicia said, her voice unwavering. You saw the service disparities. You saw the smirk, the refusal, the shifting tone. She paused. I'm not here to humiliate anyone. but I won't let another passenger of color be quietly humiliated in the name of comfort or politeness. Those days are over. The cabin remained still. Then, slowly, Miriam rose to her feet. I heard it, she said quietly. I heard the stewardess deny her meal for no reason. And I heard a racial slur whispered behind her seat. I should have spoken sooner. I didn't, but I'm saying it now. Another pause. Then Mr. Reed cleared his throat. He didn't stand, but he spoke. She was definitely treated differently. I saw it too. One by one, passengers began shifting, whispering, watching. Alicia wasn't just documenting anymore. She was shifting the weight of silence back onto those who had built it. But then, the intercom buzzed sharply overhead. It was the pilot. His voice was tense. Ladies and gentlemen, due to reports of unruly behavior in first class, we will be continuing our emergency landing protocol. This is a precautionary measure. Please remain seated until security personnel board. Unruly. The word cracked through the cabin, like lightning. Alicia turned slowly toward the front, her jaw tightening. Unruly, she said aloud, not for herself, but for everyone listening. Melanie stepped forward quickly, seizing the moment. She's disturbing the passengers. We're trained to de-escalate situations like this. Miriam's voice rang out. She's not disturbing anyone. She's speaking facts. Don't twist this. But it was too late. The word was already in the air. Unruly. It was a label. A trap. Alicia knew the power of that word, especially when aimed at someone like her. It wasn't just a description. It was a code. A justification. She turned to the passengers again. You're hearing it happen in real time. I stood. I spoke. I listed regulations. And now I'm unruly. That's how fast the narrative flips. Natalie stepped forward, voice cracking. She hasn't been disruptive, she said, voice barely above a whisper. She's been calm. This isn't right. Melanie shot her a look sharp, commanding. But Natalie didn't back down this time. I'm not going down with this, she said. Not for you. The tension in the cabin shattered like glass. A murmur spread. Now there were passengers recording with their phones, and still the door hadn't opened. Alicia checked her phone. Live feed, 42 minutes. Recording secure. Audio captured. She returned to her seat without being asked. Hands visible. Movements slow. Outside, flashing lights reflected against the fuselage. Inside, Alicia leaned her head back, exhaled, and whispered under her breath, now they'll have to listen. And just as the door clicked open, a male voice from behind her row called out. That's her. That's the one causing problem. Alicia turned and saw a man in an airline security vest. She didn't recognize stepping onto the plane, eyes locked on her. The heat outside the aircraft was thick, rippling through the Houston tarmac as the sun bore down unforgivingly. The portable staircase creaked under the boots of the airport security team, their silhouettes sharp against the blazing light. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was tighter than the recycled air itself. Eyes darted, hands met mid-reach for bags, and every passenger watched the man in the security vest approach Alicia's row like an executioner, walking to the gallows.
That's her, the man behind Alicia had said, loud, certain.
With the confidence of someone used to being believed. Alicia didn't flinch. She didn't look at the man accusing her. She looked directly at the airport security officer who had just stepped aboard. He was tall, brown-skinned, mid-40s, face unreadable. His badge read S. Turnbull. He scanned the row, lips pressed tight. Miss Walker? He asked, voice low but firm. Alicia slowly stood, body relaxed, posture deliberate. Her encrypted phone was still streaming, discreetly tucked into her jacket. That's me. We need to ask you a few questions off the aircraft, Turnbull said. His voice wasn't aggressive yet, but it carried the weight of authority. Not the kind that begged for attention, but the kind that could shift the entire narrative with a single word. Melanie stepped up from behind, her face painted with concern, but the cracks showed in her mascara. She's been disturbing passengers and refusing crew instructions. Turnbull didn't look at her. He held his gaze on Alicia. I've been calm, Alicia replied, and everything I've said has been backed by federal regulation. We can handle that outside, Turnbull said, motioning toward the front exit. Please. Alicia moved down the aisle without hesitation, collecting her bag on the way. As she passed Miriam, their eyes met again. Miriam gave the faintest nod. So did Mr. Reed. But no one else moved. No one else spoke. She stepped out into the heat, the staircase vibrating under her feet. The sky wide and cloudless. A black SUV with tinted windows waited at the base. Another man, white, clean-shaven, sunglasses low, stood beside it, holding a clipboard. Name, he asked. As Alicia approached, she stopped 2 feet from him, raised her chin slightly. You already know who I am. The man blinked. Ma'am. FIA Agent 4729B. Alicia Jameson. The woman your airline crew tried to silence mid-air. She tapped her phone and ended the live stream. It's all been recorded and sent. You're already late. A beat of silence. Then the man shifted. You're FIA? She nodded once. Behind her, Turnbull's eyebrows rose. He suddenly realized what this was. Not a removal, not an arrest, a reckoning. Inside the SUV, Alicia was given bottled water, a towel for the heat, and a stack of standard incident forms pre-filled with her alias, seat number, and flight information. Don't worry, said the driver, a black woman in her early 50s who handed her the forms. We've been watching the live stream. Whole office has. They're already scrubbing their internal channels. Alicia blinked. Already? Corporate damage control, the woman said, starting the car. You lit the match. Now they're chasing the fire. By the time Alicia reached the FIA field office, her footage had been reviewed, clipped and cross-verified with other sources. Passenger recordings, crew logs, and even audio pulled from the aircraft's ambient cabin system. What she had captured wasn't just misconduct, it was the blueprint of institutional racism. With a smile, the footage was damning. Melanie's refusal to serve her, the whispered slur behind her seat. The fake watch list Natalie confirmed existed. The moment Alicia calmly cited FAA regulations, only to be labeled unruly. Every moment, every microaggression, every non-apology, and they were all time-stamped. Meanwhile, at the airline's corporate headquarters, chaos bloomed behind closed doors. Within hours of landing, a generic corporate statement was issued on the airline's Twitter and Instagram pages. We take passenger concerns very seriously, and are currently reviewing an in-flight incident involving a customer and our crew. Our commitment to equality and service remains a top priority. Alicia saw it while sitting in a chilled conference room at the FIA field office, sipping coffee and scanning her emails. Her supervisor, Donovan, entered quietly and handed her a printed file. Melanie Carr, he said, flight attendant for 8 years. No formal write-ups. But, he flipped the folder open. 6 informal complaints, all buried, all from black passengers. Somehow, Donovan said dryly, they never made it past internal arbitration. Alicia flipped through the pages. One from a black businessman, who was asked to move to the back for a real passenger. One from a mother and daughter who were denied pre-boarding despite a medical condition. One from a civil rights attorney who documented every word Melanie had said, and received a vague apology, and a 50 patterns, Alicia muttered. Donovan leaned against the table. And you just gave us the thread to unravel it. Across town, the airline's legal team scrambled. Screenshots from Alicia's footage were already spreading on Twitter and Reddit. One clip, Melanie saying, "It's not for your kind," had hit 1.2 million views in under 3 hours. News outlets picked it up within the hour. Black passenger denied service in first class sparks nationwide outrage. Airline under fire after shocking in-flight footage leaks. Alicia's face wasn't even shown in the first few clips. Only her voice, but her tone was unmissable. Calm. Informed, inevitable. Natalie, the junior stewardess, had already requested legal counsel. But it was too late. The dominoes had begun to fall. The union tried to circle the wagons, claiming Melanie's behavior was taken out of context. But then the twist Alicia didn't expect arrived via email. Subject line flagged urgent internal leak. It was an anonymous message. A screenshot. A forward from a whistleblower inside the airline's HR. Melanie Carr, 11 months ago, pictured in a mediation room. Next to her, a young black man in a wheelchair. The caption on the original file read, "Formal complaint. Service refusal. Settled confidentially. Buried." Again. Alicia forwarded the image to Donovan. "I wasn't the first," she said. "And unless we move," he replied, "you won't be the last." By evening, a reporter from a major network reached out to FIA. They wanted to speak to Alicia directly. Donovan looked at her carefully. "You don't have to go public." But Alicia shook her head. "They already made me visible without asking. I'd rather do it on my terms." The final clip that went viral wasn't even part of Alicia's footage. It came from a teenage passenger seated 2 rows behind first class. Someone who had quietly recorded the entire moment. Alicia cited FIA regulations. The post went up on TikTok. Captain, they told her she didn't belong, but she knew the law better than anyone on that plane. It hit 3.6 million views by midnight. And in the comments section, someone posted the HR screenshot. Melanie's not new to this. They've just been hiding it. Hours later, Alicia's secure inbox pinged again, this time with a subject line that made her breath catch. Urgent. You've been requested to testify in open hearing. Congress is watching. The request to testify came with less ceremony than Alicia expected. No headlines, no fanfare, just a line of text at the top of a secure email. Request for live appearance before Congressional Subcommittee on Transportation Equity. Confirm availability. She stared at the screen for nearly a full minute before breathing. It wasn't fear exactly. It was weight, the gravity of knowing that her words could no longer just echo in a conference room or go viral in a clipped 90-second TikTok. Now they'd be embedded in the public record, dissected by political machines, referenced in op-eds, debated by cable news panels, who would never fully understand the soul-level fatigue of always having to explain your existence. She clicked confirm. Donovan barely looked surprised when she walked into his office to tell him. He pushed a thick folder across the desk instead. You might want to read this before you step in front of that mic, he said. The folder was labeled Internal Correspondence, Elevated Concern. Inside, there were printed email chains between upper-level airline executives. Most were redacted. Names, locations, and timestamps blurred or whited out. But enough had been left untouched to tell a very clear story. One memo dated only 5 months prior had the subject line, Maintaining Premium Atmosphere in FC. FC for first class. The body of the email included lines like, Monitor ticketing to ensure loyalty members remain the face of first class. Avoid overrepresentation of low-frequency travelers in premium cabins, particularly those who may alter brand perception. Alicia felt her stomach knot. Another email, from an executive in revenue optimization, included this sentence. We need to be more vigilant about the visual demographic consistency in the forward cabin. It matters more than we're admitting. No names were mentioned. But the code was clear. It didn't need to say black, or brown, or ethnic. The language was designed to float just above accountability, to be deniable. Visual demographic consistency. The entire system wasn't just biased. It was programmed. These were sent internally? Alicia asked. Donovan nodded grimly. Someone leaked them anonymously. They're still trying to find the source. She flipped the last page in the file and found a short email sent from a regional operations manager to a cabin crew lead. No more surprise guests up front. We're selling an experience, not just a seat. There it was. The truth. Unvarnished. Passengers like Alicia weren't a threat because they misbehaved. They were a threat because they disrupted the illusion. The illusion of first class being a safe haven for the powerful and predictable. The illusion of air travel as meritocracy, not theater. It wasn't about the meal. It never was. That same night, another story broke on an independent investigative blog, titled simply, The Quiet Gatekeeping of First Class. It included photos from internal training guides, whistleblower interviews, and even sample scripts for dealing with escalations that mirrored Alicia's experience almost exactly. The post cited anonymous staffers who said crew were coached informally on how to subtly downgrade undesirable energy in first class, which often meant black women with confidence. The article didn't even name Alicia, but readers knew. The comment sections exploded. Still, the airline held the line. A new statement came the next morning. We believe in inclusivity and service to all. Recent social media content does not reflect the values of our brand, and we are conducting an internal review. No apology. No accountability. Just words arranged into legal insulation. But by then, the tide had shifted. A leak surfaced in the inboxes of 3 different journalists. An internal chain titled Crisis Strategy, FIA Interference. The emails detailed potential ways to discredit rogue passenger narratives and emphasize loyalty-based seating dynamics in public messaging. Donovan dropped the documents onto Alicia's desk with one line. They're not just reacting. They've been preparing for people like you. Alicia didn't flinch. Her voice was gaining traction. But the real threat wasn't hate. It was spin. She began writing her testimony that same night. Not just as an agent, but as a human being. Not with outrage, with precision. She included data, first-hand accounts, specific policy breakdowns, moments from her childhood that showed the long thread of quiet rejection, from libraries to lunchrooms, to now luxury cabins 30,000 feet in the air. And then the email came.
No subject line.
No sender name. Just a message in plain text. She's not the only one. This goes deeper. Alicia stared at the words, her heart drumming in her chest. There was no attachment, no sign-off. Just a second line sent 45 seconds later. Check the Miami-LA red-eye crew files from March. Look at row 2A. She immediately forwarded it to Donovan. He replied within 5 minutes, cross-referencing now. If this is true, we're not just looking at one stewardess or one airline. We're looking at a pattern across multiple routes and regions. Alicia leaned back in her chair. This wasn't about a single incident. Not anymore. This was systemic choreography, racism wrapped in protocol, discrimination with a service smile. The more she peeled back the layers, the more she saw how meticulously casual it all was. The denials weren't clumsy. They were engineered to seem reasonable. The smiles weren't fake. They were defense mechanisms. The real enemy wasn't rage. It was indifference. Alicia closed the laptop gently and looked out the office window. Beyond the skyline, planes took off in rhythmic intervals, engines roaring into blue sky. Most of them would land without incident. Passengers would sip wine, eat meals, lean back in false peace. But beneath those tray tables and turn-down blankets, there were layers, assumptions, barriers, invisible assignments of worthiness. She thought of the little girl with the napkin, of Miriam, finally standing, of Melanie, grinning as she denied a meal like she'd done it 100 times before, and of whoever had just emailed her, whoever had seen enough to risk leaking more. Her phone buzzed again, this time a text from Donovan. You were right to go public. We just got a subpoena. Congress wants to see the emails too. Alicia closed her eyes. There was no turning back. But for the first time, the weight felt less like a burden, and more like momentum. Moments later, her encrypted phone lit up again, this time with a file attachment labeled Audio Transcript, Melanie Poe Supervisor. We just make sure the ones who don't fit know it. The audio file arrived encrypted but easy to access through Alicia's secure FIA interface. She clicked it open, earbuds in, eyes fixed on the waveform that rippled across the screen. It was short, just under 4 minutes, but as the voices played, it was clear that 4 minutes could shatter a system. Melanie's voice came first, unmistakable even in low fidelity. Some of them walk in here like they own the cabin. First class or not, you can feel they don't belong. Then a second voice. Male, older, calm, but with the unmistakable tone of authority. We don't need problems on these routes. Keep them happy, but make sure the ones who don't fit know it. Subtle? Always. Alicia paused the file, bile rising in her throat. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even shock. It was recognition. This was the quiet machinery behind the curtain. The soft yeses and hard no's. The gatekeeping dressed in guidelines. The denials tucked into discretion. She reopened the whistleblower's tip and compared it to the new audio metadata. The timestamps matched the flight records from March, Miami to LA. Row 2A had been occupied by a retired black federal judge. Alicia remembered the case vaguely. It had been flagged as a passenger miscommunication. But now, hearing Melanie and her supervisor reduce it to a strategy, she realized how many times this had happened unnoticed and documented, unanswered. Donovan entered her office moments later. No knock. Just quiet urgency. We've confirmed the second voice. William Stenson, crew chief for South Atlantic Division. Melanie's direct supervisor. Alicia looked up. The one who processed her last 3 internal reviews? The same. And buried every one of them. He's been with the company for 19 years. Alicia's pulse ticked faster. And still in charge. Donovan nodded grimly. For now. But that's about to change. The floodgates had opened in the past 24 hours. The leaked emails had made national headlines. But this was fuel. Within hours, Stenson was placed under administrative leave, though Alicia knew that was corporate speak for stall, until we assess liability. Melanie was reportedly unreachable, though someone inside the union leaked that she'd lawyered up fast, and was blaming crew culture for her conduct. And yet, even as the scandal widened, the airline tried to control the narrative. One executive gave a tepid interview on a morning show. While we deeply regret the experience of our valued customer, We must remember that our employees are also under immense pressure. This is a time for understanding and unity.
Alicia nearly laughed.
Understanding. They'd used the same word when she was 10, after a teacher told her her hair was too distracting. When she was 16, and asked to speak less aggressively during a debate round she'd clearly won. When she was 25, and passed over for promotion by a manager who said she just didn't click with the team. Always the same word. A shield. An eraser. Understanding. But Alicia wasn't interested in understanding anymore. She wanted accountability. She wanted names, dates, policy numbers, and consequences. That afternoon, as she walked into FIA headquarters, past news crews and protesters holding handmade signs with phrases like, "Black voices matter at 30,000 feet," Donovan met her at the elevator with a look she hadn't seen before. Not concern. Not pride. Permission. "It's official," he said. "They want you to testify. Live. National television. Public hearing." Alicia exhaled. "When?" "2 days." "Who'll be there?" "Transportation Subcommittee, chaired by Congresswoman Velasquez. Media will have full access. And yes, Melanie's legal team has been notified." Alicia paused. "She'll be watching." Donovan gave a knowing smile. "They all will." For the rest of the day, Alicia prepped, not rehearsed. She didn't believe in scripting pain. But she reviewed documents, framed her testimony, chose her words with surgical precision. She didn't need drama. The truth was loud enough. That night her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous tip. A folder this time, photos of Melanie from her training days. Laughing with fellow stewardesses, one of whom was making a mocking face with exaggerated lips. A second photo, a text exchange from 2 years ago. Melanie's name visible. Got another one in row 1. Thinks she's Michelle Obama. Watch this. Another image, a copy of a written complaint from a black nurse. Denied water after asking twice. Told her to wait her turn. Didn't like that. Shock. Each of these had been buried, filtered, or handled by Melanie's supervisor, Stenson. Alicia sent the entire package to the congressional subcommittee. No emotion, just truth. The kind that didn't need hashtags. She stood that night in her apartment, staring at herself in the mirror, trying to picture the hearing. Trying to imagine what it would feel like to speak not just for herself, but for the dozens of names buried in archived HR folders. For the little girl with the napkin. For the judge in 2A. For the nurse. For the ones who never said a word because they knew they wouldn't be believed. She practiced one line again and again. The only one she refused to let go of. Bias doesn't wear a uniform, but it knows how to fold one. The next morning, Alicia received another email. This one from a known name. Miriam, the white woman from the flight. It was a short note. "I'm going to the hearing. I don't want to stay silent anymore. If you need me to speak, I'll be there." Alicia read it twice, then typed back a single sentence. "Show up. That's the first step." The hearing location was confirmed. The topic was titled "Equity in the Skies, Addressing Racism in Commercial Air Travel." Alicia packed her notes, her phone, her credentials, and something else. The napkin, from the flight. Still folded. Still legible. A reminder. As she arrived at the Capitol steps, an aide rushed to meet her, whispering, "Change of plan. Melanie has agreed to testify too. She's here, and she's blaming the system, not herself." The marble floor of the Capitol hallway was too polished. It reflected Alicia's heels as she walked steadily toward the hearing room, her heart not pounding but pacing, a deliberate rhythm, like the build-up before a verdict. Cameras lined the corridor, journalists barking questions she didn't respond to. She didn't need to. The time for soundbites had passed. She wasn't here to perform grief. She was here to present evidence. When she reached the double doors, an aide intercepted her. "Miss Jameson, quick update. Melanie Carr has arrived. She's agreed to testify voluntarily." Alicia blinked once. Testify? She's positioning herself as a whistleblower. Says she was part of a broader culture of compliance and was just doing what she was trained to do. Alicia's jaw stayed tight. So now she's a victim. She's calling it systemic failure. Alicia didn't laugh, though she could have. It was predictable. An old script absolved the individual by blaming the system. And yes, the system was guilty. But Alicia knew better than most. Systems don't operate in a vacuum. People push the levers. People like Melanie. The hearing room was full. Not just full-packed. Congressional aides stood against the walls. Media huddled along the back row. Tripods poised, protesters gathered outside, visible through the large windows, holding signs that read, "Bias has altitude. First class, second class treatment. Believe black women." A long mahogany table stood at the front, behind which the subcommittee sat. An array of solemn faces, carefully neutral expressions. At the far end sat Congresswoman Elena Velasquez, chair of the Transportation Equity Subcommittee, sharp, composed, no nonsense. Agent Alicia Jameson, a clerk called. Alicia stepped forward. She took her seat, unfolded the napkin slowly, and placed it beside her prepared documents. That one square of white cotton said more than any printed exhibit could. The oath was administered. Cameras clicked. The room settled. Then Congresswoman Velasquez nodded. "You may begin." Alicia leaned into the microphone. Her voice was clear, but not rehearsed. Every syllable carried weight, not because it was loud, but because it was undeniable. "I boarded Flight 387, as a civilian," she began. "But I flew it as an investigator." She laid it out piece by piece. The service denied. The watch list. The coded language. The emails. The napkin. The slur. The tone didn't waver. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She narrated the humiliation as methodically as one might explain a security protocol. When she played the audio of Melanie and Stinson, "Make sure the ones who don't fit know it," there was a visible shift in the room. Legislators adjusted in their chairs. One aide dropped her pen. The room was not reacting to shock. It was reacting to recognition. Everyone had heard a version of that voice somewhere before. Alicia continued. "I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't have been the last. The system doesn't require open hatred, just silent permission." She paused, scanning the room. "And I'm here today because silence is what gave them altitude." There was a long, heavy silence. Not awkward, not dead, just reverent. Then Velasquez leaned forward. "Agent Jameson, what would you say is the most dangerous part of this system?" Alicia didn't hesitate. "It's not the slurs. It's not the denials. It's that people like Melanie are both punished and protected. She was trained to profile, then punished when she got caught. But the people who trained her, promoted." Murmurs rippled. Alicia sat back. Then a second clerk leaned into the microphone. "Committee requests the presence of Randall McVeigh, CEO of North Sky Airlines." Gasps. Audible now. Alicia turned slowly. The gallery behind her shifted as a man in a tailored suit stepped through the side door, flanked by legal counsel. McVeigh, CEO. White. Late 50s. Charismatic when needed. Cold when useful. He approached the table slowly. Jaw clenched. He wasn't used to being summoned. He was used to being scheduled. Velasquez didn't waste time. "Mr. McVeigh, this subcommittee has received unreleased footage from Flight 34087, captured by internal surveillance. You are now required to view this footage as part of the public record." His face didn't move, but his eyes tightened. Alicia knew he'd seen some of it before. Sanitized versions through corporate legal filters. But not this. Not what she'd kept streaming through her body cam. A large monitor rolled to the center. The clip played. Melanie's smirk. The fake menu policy. The steward calling Alicia entitled. The moment she asked for a meal, and was told, "It's not for your kind." There were no edits. No bleeped words. No euphemisms. Just the truth, projected in 1080p, to the people responsible for writing the rules. McVeigh sat still, but his face paled. The footage ended. Velasquez waited, then asked one question. "Mr. McVeigh, do you stand by your company's handling of this passenger?" McVeigh cleared his throat, leaned forward, and began to speak. But Alicia's phone vibrated. Just one. She checked the screen discreetly. Unknown number. New message. She opened it. There was no greeting. Just a photo. A screen grab from an airline crew forum. A thread titled, "New list, eyes open. Updated passenger risk tags." Attached beneath it was a spreadsheet screenshot. Color-coded. Names. Routes. Flag reason. And at the top of the list under Do Not Prioritize FC was her. Walker. Alicia. Investigative risk downgrade if possible. The system was still live. Even after everything. The napkin. The footage. The testimony. They were still doing it. Alicia raised her hand to the committee. "Madam Chair, I've just received proof this discrimination protocol is still in use. Real time, right now." Cameras swiveled, reporters gasped, and Velasquez banged her gavel. "Submitted immediately. This hearing isn't over. By the time Alicia left the Capitol that evening, the sun had dipped behind the dome, casting long shadows across the lawn. Protesters still gathered at the base of the steps, their chants gentler now, but no less persistent. The air was thick with a sense of reckoning. For many, it was the end of something long overdue. But for Alicia, it felt like the middle, like she had ripped the veil off a wound the world had trained itself not to see. The hearing had gone viral within hours. Every major network aired segments. Footage of Melanie's words, of the CEO's paling expression, and of Alicia calmly presenting real-time evidence of the ongoing discrimination, all replayed in loops across cable news and social media. The public response was immediate and volcanic. Petitions demanding airline reform exploded. Calls flooded Northsky's customer service centers. Former employees began coming forward, first in trickles, then in waves. They told stories of crew chats where passengers were mocked, of unofficial guidance about maintaining ambience in premium cabins, of threats from supervisors who promised that playing the race card would get you grounded. Within 48 hours, Melanie Carr was officially terminated, her union unable to shield her after the leaked audio was authenticated. William Stenson, her supervisor, resigned under pressure and was referred to the Department of Transportation's Ethics Board for enabling culture of targeted discrimination. Randall McVeigh, the airline's CEO, issued a public apology televised, carefully worded, and widely panned as hollow. "I deeply regret the failures in oversight," he said, standing stiffly at a press podium. "We will do better." Alicia watched it in her apartment, arms crossed, the apology ringing hollow in her ears. He never said her name, never acknowledged the system's architecture, only the unfortunate conduct of a few individuals. It was always a few, never the framework. And still lawsuits rolled in. A class action suit was filed by a group of former passengers, all black, who had documented similar experiences. Another came from a coalition of current flight attendants who claimed retaliation for speaking up. FIA's investigation, once a quiet probe, was now front-page news. And yet, despite the firings, the lawsuits, and the public embarrassment, Alicia felt none of the satisfaction people expected her to feel. Not because she wasn't proud, but because pride didn't wash the feeling out of her skin. The residue. The way she still noticed when security glanced at her twice, or when someone clutched their bag a little tighter at baggage claim. Racism didn't retreat just because cameras were watching. It got quieter, sharper. She knew the system had been cracked, but not collapsed. And then, 3 days after the hearing, a courier knocked at her FIA office door. He didn't speak, just handed her a sealed envelope stamped with a red band, and the words, "Top priority, eyes only." Her heart paused. She waited until the door closed behind him before peeling back the seal. Inside was a file, a single title on the first page. Class Suppression Program, Internal Compliance Draft, Restricted Circulation. Alicia's breath caught. It was real. Not theory. Not assumption. Not a few rogue actors. A program. She flipped to the second page. It was a breakdown of an internal protocol authored by a now retired VP of brand experience. The language was academic, sterile, but the message cut like glass. In order to protect the luxury perception of our premium cabins, crew are advised to enforce unspoken codes of conduct and appearance. A demographic balance must be maintained to ensure long-term brand loyalty from high-income consumers. There it was. Demographic balance. Brand perception. Guidelines dressed as strategy. Another section outlined training materials for managing disruptive energy. It was a list of profile categories based on race, age, gender, dress, speech, and travel frequency. Passengers who didn't match the profile of expected first-class travelers were flagged internally, not formally, but through crew discretion protocols. In other words, profiling with deniability. One paragraph made her stop cold. Passengers with assertive tone, excessive documentation, or regulatory familiarity may be subject to passive service deferral to discourage repetition of booking pattern. They had been tracking people like her, punishing confidence, weaponizing subtlety. Alicia shut the file and leaned back in her chair. It wasn't just the stewardess. It wasn't even just the airline. It was design. A machine built, not to exclude openly, but to whisper people out the door. To drain dignity quietly. To make first class feel unwelcoming, without ever saying why. This was the blueprint. And now she had it. The next morning, Alicia met with Donovan. He read the document twice, then looked up, expression dark. I thought we were investigating behavior, he said. Turns out we've been investigating policy. We've only scratched the surface, Alicia replied. And the hearings? They were just the spark. But this is the fuel. Donovan exhaled. You're going to have to testify again. I know. This time, you'll need to name it. Alicia nodded. Class suppression program. It was no longer a ghost. It was documented, endorsed, trained, implemented. She thought of all the passengers who had never spoken up because they thought it was just them. Thought they had imagined it. Thought they were the problem. She thought of the woman who offered a napkin. Of Miriam's shaky voice. Of the teenage boy who had posted the TikTok that started it all. They hadn't needed permission to resist. They just needed proof. And now, Alicia held it. But with that truth came a heavier question. What happens when the world hears it? Because systems don't collapse gracefully. They break loud. They flail. They retaliate. As she packed her briefcase, her phone buzzed with a new message from a restricted FIA server. In light of your findings, expect pushback. Surveillance suggests attempts to discredit whistleblowers already underway. Stay alert. Alicia stared at the screen. They were already trying to bury the truth. Again. Just then, her phone vibrated once more. This time with a video clip. It was grainy but clear. A group of uniformed flight staff in training. On screen, the instructor says, "You never deny service outright. You make them uncomfortable enough to never book first class again." The training video played on Alicia's screen in cruel, measured stillness. The resolution was poor, the lighting dim, but the audio rang out clear as glass, sliced with the same professional polish that made institutional language so dangerous. A woman's voice, mid-40s, clipped, rehearsed, spoke from the front of a training room. She stood beside a projection screen, labeled Premium Cabin Experience. Conflict avoidance. Now remember, you never deny service outright. You make them uncomfortable enough to never book first class again. There was laughter in the background. Alicia's throat tightened. It wasn't just the content. It was the calm in the instructor's voice. Like she was teaching customer engagement. Like she was offering strategy, not endorsing exclusion. Another trainee raised their hand. What if they call us out on it? You smile, the instructor replied, and say it's a logistics issue. Then you move on. Never argue. Never document. Just deflect. The clip ended. Alicia sat back in her office chair, hands still on the mouse, the silence afterward thicker than sound. She'd been preparing to go public with the class suppression program, but this footage, it wasn't policy notes or redacted memos. It was confession. It was the final lock, clicking open. She forwarded the file to Donovan and immediately received a secure reply. This confirms systemic training. We escalate now. Are you prepared to go fully public? She stared at the words for a long moment. Her cursor hovered over the keyboard, then dropped. Prepared? Prepared wasn't the question. The question was cost. Because Alicia already knew the stakes. To expose something this embedded, this well-oiled, she couldn't remain a behind-the-scenes operative anymore. No more controlled testimonies. No more filtered statements. She would have to name it, face it, and lead the firestorm that would follow. But doing that would cost her more than safety. It could cost her the only job where she felt like the truth mattered. Still, something deeper pushed against her hesitation. It was the voice of that flight instructor. It was the girl with the napkin. It was the quiet fury Alicia had carried through airports her entire life, masked by excellence, padded by degrees, cloaked in courtesy. She picked up the sealed red folder labeled Class Suppression Program and slid the training footage into an encrypted USB. Then she opened her email and began to write, "To whom it may concern. I am Alicia Jameson. I was once your quiet passenger. I am now your loudest mirror." That evening, FIA released a short press advisory confirming that an urgent equity-focused review was underway. Alicia's name was not mentioned, but insiders already knew what was coming. By morning, the news broke. Whistleblower agent plans public disclosure on class discrimination in commercial aviation. Within hours, Alicia's inbox was overflowing. Threats, thank yous, requests for interviews, offers from legal teams and media outlets and advocacy groups. But Alicia didn't respond to any of them. Instead, she prepared for the press conference, one she never intended to lead. It was scheduled for noon, at the Federal Building downtown. The stage had already been set by FAA officials. Expecting only routine updates, Alicia had other plans. She arrived just after 11:45 a.m., wearing the same navy blazer she'd worn on Flight 387. The same one the stewardess had looked past. The one that had recorded everything. She carried nothing but the red file and the USB. As she stepped through the side entrance, an aide met her. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. Alicia stopped. "I'm not sure of anything," she said. "Except that silence protects no one." She entered the press room. The crowd was larger than anticipated. Dozens of journalists, cameras, flashing lights, murmurs vibrating through the room like low thunder. Donovan was already there, standing at the back, nodding once in silent support. Alicia moved to the podium. She placed the sealed file in front of her, glanced at the microphone, and then lifted her head. "Before this briefing begins, I need to say something that was never meant to be said out loud." The room stilled. She continued, "I have in my possession evidence of an internal program that instructed airline staff across multiple carriers to discriminate based on race, appearance, and social profile. It was not an accident. It was not individual bias. It was strategy." Gasps. Clicking pen. A few whispered curses. She held up the USB. "This device contains audio from a training session where staff were told not to deny service directly, but to make certain passengers feel unwelcome until they simply stopped coming." She laid it gently next to the red file. "I'm not here to destroy an airline. I'm here to expose a mindset. One that tells black passengers they're lucky to be allowed in spaces they paid to be in. One that tells crew to police who looks right in first class. One that taught a little girl to warn me quietly, with a napkin." The room was now silent but electric. "I was once told by a flight crew that a first-class meal wasn't for my kind. I'm here today because my kind has been polite long enough." The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. And that's when Alicia saw her. Standing at the edge of the room, near the press entrance. Uniform pressed. Hair tied back. A new airline badge pinned tightly to her chest. Melanie Carr. Back in uniform. Watching. Not from shame, but from something colder. Positioning. Alicia's eyes met hers. Steady. Melanie didn't flinch. She simply stood, chin high, as if the storm never touched her. Alicia spoke once more. "This isn't about revenge. It's about removal. Of policy. Of protection. Of the permission to exclude." A reporter shouted from the back. "What do you want, Ms. Jameson? What's the goal?" Alicia didn't hesitate. "I want every passenger, no matter their color, class, or confidence, to board a plane and not wonder if they're welcome." And with that, she stepped down. The crowd surged forward, but Alicia didn't linger. She handed the USB and file to the lead investigator and exited through the side hall. Donovan caught up with her outside. "You just cracked open the industry." Alicia kept walking. "Then let them rebuild it right." But behind them, the press conference wasn't over. Reporters had turned to Melanie, swarming her, demanding a response. She stood frozen for a beat, then finally said, "I was told what to do. I wasn't the architect. I was the tool." But Alicia heard her, and she knew. Even tools know when they're drawing blood. As Alicia left the building, her phone lit up with one more message from an anonymous server. It read, "The system you just exposed. It's only phase 1. Prepare for backlash." The terminal was quieter than usual. The overhead announcements distant and muffled. Alicia moved through the airport like she belonged. Not hurried, not hesitant, but centered. It had been 3 months since the press conference, 3 months since she held up a red file in front of the world, and named what so many had endured in silence. Now, she was boarding a flight not undercover. Not as Alicia Walker, the planted passenger with a body cam, but as herself, Alicia Jameson, Federal In-Flight Authority investigator, the woman who had become a symbol by accident, and by design. She wore a soft gray blazer, slacks, and carried a leather satchel tucked neatly under her shoulder. No cameras, no disguises, no encrypted notes stitched into jacket linings. This time the power was visible. As she approached gate C-17, she glanced up at the digital board. Flight 1774, non-stop to Seattle, boarding first class. She stepped forward, scanned her pass, and nodded at the gate agent, who smiled. "Welcome aboard, Miss Jameson." It still startled her, the recognition. Sometimes it came with admiration, sometimes unease. But it was always there now, a name attached to a shift, a symbol wrapped in a uniform story the world had made viral. She walked down the jet bridge and stepped onto the aircraft. The cabin was pristine. Sunlight filtered through the windows, glinting off the brushed chrome and leather. Her seat, 1A again, waited. The stewardess at the door turned to greet her. Mid-30s. Auburn hair, clear voice. Professional smile. "Good morning, ma'am. Welcome." Then the smile froze. Just for a second. Recognition flickered. A slight pull at the corner of her mouth. A twitch in her brow. She looked down at Alicia's name printed on the manifest. Then back up. Her voice softened. "Are you the inspector?" Alicia smiled. Not wide. Not smug. Just enough. "Depends who's asking," she said gently, and took her seat. The stewardess Rebecca, according to her name tag, stood there a moment longer, unsure of what to say. Then she straightened, regained composure, and leaned down slightly. "If there's anything at all you need, just let me know." "Thank you," Alicia replied. She placed her satchel beneath the seat, crossed her legs, and leaned into the plush headrest. A moment passed. She exhaled slowly. Not in relief, but in recognition. The hum of the cabin, the muted tones of ambient music, the shuffle of first-class passengers storing carry-ons. It all felt the same, but it wasn't. The system had changed. Not completely, not cleanly, but undeniably. After Alicia's testimony, multiple airlines underwent emergency equity audits. The class suppression program was exposed across 3 major carriers. Laws were introduced in Congress requiring transparency in customer profiling. Airline training programs were restructured. Crew scripts were rewritten. New oversight positions were created. The term unspoken bias had entered national vocabulary. But most importantly, people started paying attention. And yet, Alicia still noticed things others missed. The man in 1B gave her a double take, then quickly averted his eyes. The couple in 2A paused as they passed her row, scanning her before realizing she belonged there. Not a celebrity, not an anomaly, just a black woman flying first class, and being seen. Rebecca returned moments later, with a glass of water and a warm towel. "No champagne?" Alicia asked lightly. Rebecca blushed. "Of course. Sorry, I just got flustered." Alicia tilted her head, curious. "Flustered?" Rebecca hesitated, then leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "It's not like it used to be. We're trained differently now. Ever since what happened, what you made happen." Alicia held her gaze. "And does it feel different?" Rebecca nodded, more honest. "Sometimes uncomfortable, but better. I know what to watch for now, and what not to assume." Alicia said nothing, but the air between them settled. Moments later, the pilot welcomed passengers over the intercom, and the cabin door sealed with a soft thud. The same sound that had once made Alicia feel boxed in, now felt like containment of a different kind, one she had agency over. As the plane ascended, she watched clouds unfold below her window, remembering the first time she sat in this same row. Back then her silence had been tactical. Today, it was chosen. She pulled out her tablet, not for work but for reflection. A new op-ed titled, "The Quiet Revolution in the Skies: How One Voice Changed a Flight Industry," had landed in her inbox. She scrolled through. It featured excerpts from passengers who had filed complaints and now felt empowered to speak. Interviews with crew who admitted they used to feel subtle pressure to discriminate, but didn't realize it until the language was exposed. There was even a quote from Miriam. "I stayed quiet on that flight, but silence is complicity." Alicia didn't just call it out. She made space for the rest of us to confront ourselves. Alicia paused there, not because it validated her, but because it reminded her why this work wasn't just about confrontation. It was about correction. A voice from behind interrupted her thoughts. A child's voice. "Mom, that's her. That's the lady from the plane." Alicia turned slightly. A young girl, 8 or 9, sat 2 rows back in coach, peeking through the gap in the curtain. Her hair in twists, bright eyes wide with recognition. Her mother gently pulled her back, embarrassed. Alicia smiled and gave the girl a small wave. The mother mouthed, "Thank you." And that was it. Not applause, not a photo op, just acknowledgement. That was enough. The captain announced their cruising altitude, 30,000 feet. The seatbelt light dimmed. Flight attendants began their round. Rebecca passed by again and stopped at Alicia's row. "I hope this flight feels different," she said softly. Alicia looked up at her. "It already does." And then, her phone vibrated. No alert tone, just a buzz-coded and internal. A secure FIA message flashed across the screen. "New lead. Unregulated private charter discrimination flagged. Exec level, international. Need eyes. Alicia blinked. Even up here above the clouds, the work wasn't done. She looked out the window. Clear sky. But turbulence was always possible. She closed her eyes briefly, grounded herself, then opened them again. Rebecca returned with a tray. Would you like the salmon or the vegetarian risotto? Alicia smiled. I'll take the risotto. Rebecca nodded, coming right up, and then just before she walked away, she turned again, her voice quieter now. Are you still the inspector? Alicia let the question hang. Then she smiled, not for her but for the girl 2 rows back who was still watching, and said, always. As the plane soared forward, Alicia's screen lit up with a new case file. This time from a whistleblower abroad. A single message attached. They're exporting the same tactics. You're needed in London. No one should have to prove they belong, especially when they've done everything right. If you've ever been judged before you spoke, or ignored like you weren't even there, you know this story isn't just a story. It's a mirror. Type yes if you believe dignity shouldn't depend on skin color. Subscribe if this broke